Hi class, welcome to lesson number 13 in our continuing economics coursework for AP Micro and Macroeconomics. Currently we're discussing the topic of consumer choice, but as usual, this is a regular tradition here. One of the things we ask you is we ask you a homework question right at the end of the lesson, and then at the beginning of the lesson we try to solve that answer. So the last question I asked was regarding the determinants that really determine the price elasticity of demand, right? So we said there are three determinants for the price elasticity of demand, and I want to write that down real quick, right? One, we said was that, so there are three particular things, right? So this is for the, let me write this down, this is price elasticity of demand. Okay, so price elasticity of demand, and we said that there were three main determinants. Okay, now the first one that comes to my mind was the fact that time was really important, right? So we said that time was important, and we said, why was time important? Well, we said that, well, it kind of differs, price elasticity of demand differs between short run and long run, right? We said that during short run, it's more inelastic, right? Because there are less substitute. In the long run, it's more elastic because there's more substitutes, right? So time and short run versus long run, right? That was a main issue, okay? So number two was, we said that income was really important, right? Because we said that based on our income, right, consumers can decide if it's elastic or inelastic. I'll tell you why, because, well, what if, right, and this is the formula, the way we explained it was with the formula, we said that, well, what's the cost of product X that you're going to buy, right? Cost of product X, product X, right? And what is that as a ratio to the total budget you have, right? Or total income, whatever the way you want to describe it, right? So total budget. Now the reason both of these are, is in terms of money. Now, why is this important? Well, because, if you have a really high budget, right, you're really well off, right, economics says that, things tend to be, really speaking, inelastic, right, because it's like you can afford more things, right? So if price really goes up by whatever, it really doesn't make a big difference for you as a consumer. Now, the cost of product X is really important because a thing like, pencils or, diamonds, they're really different because they take up bigger areas of the budget. And depending on the cost of the product, between a pencil and a diamond, elasticity really changes, okay? The third and most important one we talked about was the fact of the competitive structure of the market, right? Competitive structure of the market. And we said this was important because one fundamental rule applied to this, right? We said that, I don't know if you remember this, but the more amount of substitute products, right? Substitute products, right? Do you guys remember? Was it more elastic or was it more inelastic? For those of you who guessed more elastic, you guys are right, because the reason why it's more elastic, right, as there are more substitute products, is because what happens is that there's more number of substitute products. Me as a consumer, if some guy decides to increase the cost of, I don't know, let's choose a thing, let's take bread, okay? So there are a lot of different bakeries in your city or, a lot of different grocery markets, whatever. The point is that in general, bread has it's really competitive market, right? Which is why in a perfectly competitive market, guys, we tend to see a perfectly elastic demand, right? Perfectly competitive, your elasticity kind of looks like that, right? The whole E trick that we told you guys. So, elasticity in a perfect market is completely elastic because what happens is that, say for some reason there's some bakery and he decides to increase the cost of bread by about 20%, right? You as a consumer, you're like, hey, they're, 30 other places I can go get bread from. Why should I pay this guy? So what happens is, as a market, in a competitive market, it's completely elastic because you as a consumer, if there's even a little bit of price difference, well, you'll go to another baker and you'll ask him to bake bread for you for cheaper cost. But if there's not as many substitute products, right, it's more inelastic because, say, for some reason in your city, let's consider that the market, right, of bread, there's only one guy who makes bread, right? So if you want bread, that might be a perfectly inelastic market because he can charge you whatever he wants. If you want bread, you have to go for him. So that's why it's really important that the more number of substitute products there are in your market, the more elastic the demand curve is, okay? So these three things really decide the price elasticity of demand, and that was a homework question from before, okay? And I hope all of you remember that, right? But the topic we're really covering this time from, I don't know if you remember from last time, was that it's consumer choice, right? Consumer choice and that word that we all love called utility, right? We love utility. The reason why we love utility is, as economists, right, we can quantify how happy you are. And that's a pretty cool concept, right? Because if we can quantify that, we can try to tell you how much you're going to consume and what kind of goods you're going to consume, right? So we said we covered three main things, right? So when it came to consumer choice, right? I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is consumer choice, right? But we really talked about this in the last one, right? So consumer choice. All right, so consumer choice. Consumer choice, right? And we covered three already. One, we said that. You guys remember? A consumer rationale, right? We talked about consumer rationale. Consumer rationale, right? We said that a person will spend money on something, okay? They'll spend, as a consumer, you'll spend money, or you'll, whatever, incur the cost, right? You'll walk somewhere or you'll spend X amount of money because you find that you'll get some happiness, right? Or utility, right? Let's use that term, utility. We'll get some utility from buying that particular good or service, right? That's why you're going to make that product, and that's why it's really important to understand consumer rationale. The second thing we talked about was the fact that consumers rank their preferences, right? So we said consumers rank their preferences. Preferences, right? Why? Okay, why do they rank their preferences? It's because of the fact that when a consumer, right, wants to buy something, right? I told you guys that maybe education, right? You're going to pay for this lesson, right? Or you want to watch some TV, or you want to go play, I don't know, soccer or football, whatever it is. The reason being is that basically you're ranking your preferences and you're saying, okay, you know what? This thing makes me the happiest. I'm going to go play, I don't know, it could be cricket, it could be baseball, right? It could be anything. You're playing or you're doing something because you think that it's going to make you happy. And this is the assumption that we make, assumption number 2, in terms of quantifying your utility. Now, the third one we talked about, right, for those of you who remember, is that, you guys remember this? Okay, so we said that consumers, so there's that word again we love so much, right? Consumers understand what did we say? They understand the concept of diminishing marginal utility, right? I'm going to say that again. Diminishing marginal utility. Let me write this down now, okay? They understand the concept of diminishing marginal utility, okay? And I cannot tell you how important this term is because it's extremely important you understand diminishing marginal utility. The reason being is that diminishing marginal utility really creates the backbone, right, for the law of demand, right? The reason we have a downward sloping demand, is because of actually diminishing marginal utility. And I'll explain all of you why that is. But, before we start digging into diminishing marginal utility, I really want to go ahead on this side of the board. I want to graph total marginal utility, total utility and marginal utility. And I want to differentiate both of them, okay? So walking over here, I want to explain to you guys why it's, difference between total utility and marginal utility. Now, imagine total utility, right? What is the concept of total utility? And I'm pretty sure this is pretty, intuitive for most of you. But I'm going to go ahead and define it anyways so that we can understand what total utility is. Total utility basically states that this, concept is the total amount, right? The total amount of satisfaction that a consumer gets from a good, right? That you get, okay, as a consumer, okay, when I say you, I mean the consumer, that you acquire, right? Maybe get, whatever, same thing, get. Yeah, as a consumer from a particular good or service, okay? Good or service. All right, a lot of words there, but really speaking, it's pretty simple, okay? It's basically saying, okay, imagine that you want to go and you're going to go out to a restaurant and you want to have chips and salsa. For those of you, Spanish food, right, really is that, as you try to, the first time you have, your pizza, right, first slice of pizza, you're going to be somewhere over here, right? You're going from 0 to, oh my God, that's delicious, that's an awesome dish. And then slowly what you're going to do is you're going to add, right, pizza, more pizza, more pizza. Some point, your total utility will take a hit, right? And it'll start to go down. But it's always positive, obviously. Now, why is this the case? Why is it increasing at a decreasing rate and is it going down after some point? Because have you ever tried to go out and eat something, right? Or going out and done something, right? So you go out and you want to play basketball, right? Basketball is a pretty huge sport, right? You go out and you want to play basketball. And the first hour you play, it's amazing, right? Basketball is really cool. You're playing with your friends, having a lot of fun. Second hour, you're still adding on utility. You're still getting fun. By the third hour, you're really tired. Your body cannot move, right? You're like, enough of basketball, right? So at some point, what we're going to say is, all of this is intuitive. But what we're saying at some point, this is going to start to decrease, right? So there's a maximum amount of total utility you're going to get. But after that, it's going to go down, right? But it's still positive, right? Still in the positive axis. But that being said, one of the main concepts that you want to get from total utility is the fact that it increases at a decreasing rate, okay? Now, the thing is that there's this other graph, right, that I'm going to draw, okay, called MU, okay, which is marginal utility, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and erase this definition of total utility because I want to compare side by side marginal utility to total utility. And I'll tell you why, okay? The reason is that marginal utility, right? What is marginal utility again? Let's define it real quick, okay? Marginal utility is the amount of utility or the amount of satisfaction that you get by adding one extra unit, okay? So marginal utility, okay, a cool way of thinking about it is that it's the slope of total utility. It's the slope of total utility. And the way we graph marginal utility, okay, which is a slope of, it's kind of like taking a derivative for those of you who've taken calculus. Kind of taking a derivative of total utility, right? But marginal utility basically is saying, well, for every additional unit that I add here, how much am I actually adding in terms of utility? And I told you guys total utility goes up at a decreasing rate, right? Well, that decreasing rate, the rate that we're talking about is marginal utility, and that's why MU kind of looks like this, right? The reason why marginal utility looks like that and total utility looks like that is that total utility always sort of increases at some point and then decreases, right? But marginal utility is always going down because this right here is always going at a decreasing rate, okay? It's becoming more and more negative as you go on, the slope of it, right? And this is exactly this, okay? So marginal utility is constantly decreasing because what we're trying to say is, okay, well, this is the first ice cream that you've had, right? This is the first ice cream, right? This is going to be the second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. But the point is that between your first and second, right, when you eat that second ice cream, you're not as happy or satisfied as you were from the first. The first, you went from 0 ice cream to 1 ice cream, okay? And you're very satisfied. You're very happy. The second ice cream is going to bring you happiness, but not as much as the first happiness, okay? Which is why marginal utility is decreasing, and this is the concept we talked about called diminishing, right? Diminishing marginal utility, right? Diminishing MU, or marginal utility. The reason why it's diminishing is that it's constantly decreasing, okay? And this is the concept behind diminishing marginal utility, right? And total utility looks like that. All right, so now we've gotten total utility down. We know what marginal utility is. Let's go back here, okay, and talk about why diminishing marginal utility works in the way it does, right? So walking back over here, number 3 is diminishing marginal utility. Consumers understand this. Well, you sort of do, right? You're a consumer, and you understand the point that I talked about. I said the first ice cream, the second ice cream, you don't enjoy the second ice cream as much as you do the first ice cream. So you, as a consumer, understand it. Maybe you won't call it a diminishing marginal utility, right? You're not that nerdy, right? You understand, but now you do because it's cool, right? It's cool to understand the concept using mathematics or economics. So why is this important? The reason why diminishing marginal utility is so important is that it allows us to think about 2 things, right? One, it allows us to think about how much satisfaction is provided for each product, right? So how much, right, of utility. And what I mean by that is that, utility oftentimes is given to you in a problem, right? It might say, hey, you know what, the second cup of coffee gives you so much utility, third cup of coffee, so on and so forth. But why this is so important is it allows us to think, okay, well, at one point is this person's total utility going down, or what person's is this marginal utility not, good enough for this person? But more importantly, why this is so important is that it also allows us to dictate pricing for firms, right? So pricing also is determined by this concept. The reason why pricing is determined off of this is because that, a lot of times, I'm sure you guys have gone somewhere and they've been buy one, get one free. Buy one, get one 50% off, because they know that the first time you buy something, right, you get a lot of satisfaction in it. The chance of you buying that second pair of jeans after you buy the first pair, not likely. But if they say it's 50% off, then you'll go ahead and maybe buy that second pair of jeans, right? Because they know how much utility you get from each pair of jeans, right? And that's why they're trying to decide, well, how much should I price this particular pair of jeans or whatever it is, and they try to entice you to buy more, and because they understand the concept of diminishing marginal utility. Okay? So that's why this whole concept is very important. That being said, I'd like to move on to number 4 and 5. And 4 and 5 are really important as well because they really get to really nail this consumer choice concept that we have going here. Okay, so let me erase this. Okay, I hope you guys got 1, 2, 3 down. So consumer choice, why did I do that? Okay, I'm gonna write choice again. But anyways, let's erase this and let's talk about number 4 and 5. Okay. And really speaking, guys, 4 and 5 are also very intuitive. Consumer choice as a concept is really intuitive, in my opinion, because you think about this every day, but you necessarily don't know how to call it, right? You're like, okay, well, That's what I guess diminishing marginal utility is, right? But anyways, let's talk about consumer choice, and this is topic number 4, okay? Number 4 is about constraints. Okay, well, what is constraints, right? So let's say constraints, and constraints come from 2 sides, okay? Constraints come from 1, prices, constraints on prices, right? And I'll explain these, And secondly, constraints come in income, right? We talked about it a little bit in elasticity. All right, cool. What are these constraints? So, before we thought about consumer choice, right? So when you say, okay, you know what, let's call you John, okay? John is gonna go ahead and go into Pizza Hut, and he's buying pizza, okay? So we're trying to think about, okay, what are the things that make him decide consumer choice of pizza? How much of pizza is he gonna buy? What kind of pizza is he gonna buy, right? All of these things we can think about. But what are the constraints that apply, and what are the things that kind of apply John to buy this pizza? So before we talked about number 4, right? We talked about a couple different things, right? We said, okay, well, rationale is really important, right? This person is going to go ahead and pizza tastes good. It's that's why he's going to spend money. Pizza Hut is what he prefers, whatever. Coming to second was we said preferences, right? So we said that, okay, compared to maybe a burger, for him, pizza is more important, right? So we said preferences, right? Preferences. And then the third thing we talked about, I believe, let me look at this real quick, is that we said about, diminishing marginal utilities, right? Diminishing marginal utility. Okay? So the 3 things we talked about before: rational, preferences, diminishing marginal utility. Well, we said that, you know what? Every time this guy buys a second pizza or a third pizza, chances are he's not going to get that third or fourth pizza because, he's not going to be as happy as he is buying that first pizza, right? So, okay, well, we said that, okay, sir, you buy the second pizza, you get the 50% off or whatever. Okay, so we've understood 1, 2, 3, how this affects consumer choice. Let's talk about other constraints, okay? The other constraints we got to think about is the prices, okay? And we talked a little bit of pricing there in diminishing marginal utility. The reason why is, imagine a thing like, we talked about diamonds before, or cars or whatever it is. Imagine expensive things, right? Houses, right? Prices really constrain a person's choice. The reason why a person might live in a really big house is he might have a huge budget, right? And he can afford that big price. But imagine regular people cannot afford big houses, right? We can't afford huge palaces, right? So prices of the product constrain us from making that choice, okay? Number 2 is income. They're kind of related to each other, right? Because prices kind of, talk about your income as well. The income, obviously, the more people make money, the more things they can try to buy, or the more whatever they can have, the more utility they can get, okay? So income and prices are, again, very important constraints, okay? And lastly, number 5 is this very important concept, okay? 5 is called utility maximization principle, okay? Utility maximization principle. Okay? Utility maximization principle. All right, so what do we mean by utility maximization principle? Utility max principle, or utility maximization, basically says that you as a consumer, right, you have a particular set of income, right? We're talking about constrained maximization, okay? So you have an income, right? You say your name's John and you make $20, okay? Your income is $20, okay? So your income, John, for this example, is $20, okay? This is an example, guys. This is not just, some number. It's just example, okay? It's an example. You make $20, okay? What that really says is that And in our ideal world, obviously, use that term ceteris paribus, right? Ceteris paribus basically means that all else constant, right? Say you can only consume two goods, right? Good X and good Y, okay? So I'm going to write this down right here. Good X and Y. The utility maximization principle says that if all else is constant, ceteris paribus, based on a particular constraint like income, right? Based on these $20, the amount of X and Y you're going to buy, okay, I'm going to say this one more time. Based on the fact that you make $20, whatever your income is, okay, whatever your income is, the utility maximization principle states that the amount of good and X and good Y you can buy, okay, is based off the fact that you want to maximize your principal given a particular budget. Okay, I'm going to say this one more time. The amount of good X and good Y you can buy, or you have three goods, good X, Y, and Z, let's say. For this example, I'm using two goods, good X and Y. The amount you can buy of good X and good Y, it's going to be based on this constraint. So you're going to maximize your utility per dollar, okay? Maximize utility, right? Maximize utility per dollar, okay? So MU is marginal utility. You're going to maximize utility, marginal utility per dollar, okay? So utility maximization principle says that the amount of goods X and Y you're going to buy is based on the fact that you're going to be constrained to this $20 main concepts behind consumer choice, okay? 4 and 5 are right in front of you right here, okay? But I want you to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in consumer choice, okay? This brief explanation. In the next class, we're going to go over utility maximization principle and other concepts like income effect and substitution effect. All right, hope to see you all in the next lesson. Have fun. Take care.